Oh my god, we're almost at the end of the year. I can't tell if this year has gone by painfully quickly or painfully slowly, but it has definitely gone by painfully, hasn't it? November was a lot busier than I had expected it to be. We had some huge releases from Liturgy, King 810, Sodom, Dark Tranquility, Killer Be Killed. And while we did talk about a lot of those records, we also missed quite a few, some of which we probably shouldn't have missed, quite frankly. So before we move on to talking about some of the best albums of 2020, which is on the way, I promise you, in fact, that particular video might end up being out tomorrow, Friday, December 4th. Just so you know, pass it along. We are first going to very quickly talk about some of the albums we missed in November 2020. The first of which being Under Sullen Skies from Tombs. Now, I had every intention of reviewing this album, but when push came to shove, I chose Fuck the Facts over Tombs because I wanted to highlight some really great and inventive Canadian grindcore. It sucks because I really wanted to talk about this album, but y'all should know by now, I will never say no to metal from my native country. Under Sullen Skies is essentially a culmination of everything that Tombs have done so well over the past decade. Their signature fusion of black metal and post-metal, now more cohesive, now more punishing, now more devastating, and also more progressive in some aspects. I especially like how Tombs, as far as their presentation and aesthetic is concerned, is leaning heavier into full-on traditional black metal. It makes the album feel so menacing and sinister and truly evil. Yeah, I like this fucking thing a lot. It's intelligent, it's immersive, it's heavy as holy fucking hell. It might be their best album yet. Had I gone ahead and reviewed it, I probably would have given it a 4 out of 5. Next up, we have a new EP from My Dying Bride, entitled Macabre Cabaret, riding hot off the heels of their most recent studio album, The Ghost of Orion. But make no mistake, this is not necessarily a continuation of that record. In fact, this feels distinctly more primal and raw. It's not quite as lush and evocative as the Ghost of Orion songs dredge on for a little bit longer. The vocals are a little bit harsher. The music as a whole is a lot more grainy and metallic. Well, okay, maybe excluding the closing track, A Purse of Golden Stars. That's actually a really beautiful track. Look, what I'm trying to get at here is that Macabre Cabaret doesn't exactly have the same impact of Ghost of Orion, which isn't a bad thing per se, and it is even somewhat expected considering this is an EP and not a full-blown studio album, but it does feel strange nonetheless coming off of an album as emotionally charged and inspired as The Ghost of Orion. Still a damn fine EP though, ultimately. I know it sounds like I'm shitting on this thing, but I actually do like it. Next up, another EP, this time from Psycroptic, entitled The Watcher of All. I don't really have a lot to say about this EP at all, if we're being honest. It is yet another super well-made and hyper-technical release from Psycroptic. It's heavy, it's loud, it's nasty, it's super fucking in your face. If you're just looking for some really dense and brutal tech depth that doesn't waste any fucking time whatsoever, this is exactly what you're looking for. And even if you aren't, honestly, fucking give it a listen regardless. Why not? The whole thing is like 8 minutes long. It's not going to eat up a whole lot of your time. Next up, we have Illusion of Control from Thrown into Exile. And, it's okay. Just kind of really generic early 2000s melodic metalcore. I'm reminded of really early Trivium. I'm reminded of some really early Bullet for My Valentine. I'm reminded a little bit of like 2003 In Flames as well. It can be fun in small doses, don't get me wrong, and I will never knock the determination of Marco Rubio, who's been trying to get this project off the ground for like a fucking decade now. But I'm just not personally really into it that much. But hey, maybe you're looking for like a really fucking old school melodic metalcore record, in which case, maybe this is for you. Next up, we have Blackheart from Within the Ruins. I've received a lot of requests for this, which means I'm probably about to break some hearts. I don't really like this record either. I wasn't really expecting to like this record. I've never really been a fan of this really djenty, proggy deathcore sound. I think for that reason, I truthfully had intended to just ignore this record, but as I've received more and more requests, that's just not really possible anymore. But hey, I'll still happily give some credit where it's due. The musicianship is really solid across the board. The production is really good across the board. I do like seeing Within the Ruins expand a little bit in some parts, like on the track Open Wounds, which has a little bit of like a Swedish melodic death metal flair to it. I think it works quite nicely with the band's proggy deathcore sound and edge. Yeah, much like Front into Exile, I don't hate it. It's just not for me, ultimately. But hey, maybe it's for you. I don't know. I know that that's a pretty fucking lazy excuse, but that's the best I got for you. Next up, Sulfuric Disintegration from Of Feather and Bone, another album that I actually really wanted to talk about because holy fuck, this thing is good. It's just so fucking dark, man. One of the most chaotic black and death metal records I've heard all year. The musicianship is absolutely fucking stellar. There's not a single riff that does not crush, a single beat that does not crush, a single vocal performance that does not send chills down my fucking spine. Just a fucking fantastic record from start to finish. If you love black and death metal, you need to hear this thing. You need to. End of story. Here's hoping the next time A Feather and Bone releases an album, I'll be able to make some room for them in my schedule because my God, at the rate they're heading, their next album is going to be like a fucking masterpiece of modern brutality. Next up, we have Ageless Violence, the debut album from glorious Depravity. Kind of a death metal supergroup of sorts here, as the project features members of Pyron, Woes, Clean Teeth, Mutilation Rites, Weeping Sores. It is very heavy, very extreme, very violent, very gruesome, taking a lot of influence from mid to late 90s death metal, specifically Cannibal Corpse and Suffocation, with maybe just the tiniest dash of Deicide. By no means an especially unique record, especially not by the standards of death metal, but all in all, still a well-made and ultimately entertaining package. Next up, we have Ægo Templo from Déluge, and this is a pretty interesting record because we're dealing with some very progressive black metal with some heavier post-metal influences and a lot of very atmospheric, almost new agey soundscapes. It's very lush and very demanding. Déluge definitely taking a page out of the Book of Death Heaven without outright copying them. In its absolute best moments, it's a very immersive and attentive record, as wave after wave of dreary blackgave wash over you. It's not always the most consistent or cohesive record, and there are times where I can't help but think, maybe this sounds a little bit too much like old school Death Heaven. But it is, all things considered, a really well-made record. Yet another one that I had wanted to review, to be honest. And had I done so, maybe a 3.5 out of 5. Maybe not the most enthusiastic 3.5 out of 5, but a 3.5 out of 5 nonetheless. Next up, we have Amphibian Ascending from Froglord, an album that y'all really want to talk about. Not only have I received a lot of requests for this, but it's even captured the attention of Banger TV. I can see why. I can see why there's so much hype and discussion around this, because this thing is pretty interesting. Very weird, droning, sludgy, almost accidentally psychedelic stoner doom with huge walls of sludgy, fuzzy riffs caked in static and slime and grit. I like that Froglord don't take themselves too seriously either. The concept even shows a little bit of self-awareness at times, particularly on tracks like the Mushroom Throne, Death Ray, and the album's title track. Yeah, I really like this thing a lot, to the point where I kind of want to pick it up on vinyl. It is just such a fascinatingly weird little stoner doom sludge thing. If by chance this isn't somehow on your radar, you need to change that. You need to check this thing out. It's pretty fucking cool. Next up, no cover from Ellefson. And yes, before you ask, that is the same Dave Ellefson of Megadeth fame. Basically what he's done here is he's gotten a bunch of his friends, a bunch of his peers, together into a room. They recorded a bunch of classic rock covers and shit like that. It's a lot like the BPMD album released earlier this year, except with a lot more talent. I mean, you've got Charlie Bennett from Anthrax, you've got Bumblefoot, formerly of Guns N' Roses, you've got Gus G from Firewind, formerly a member of Ozzy Osbourne's solo band as well. You've got Dave McClain, Sacred Reich, formerly of Machine Head. You've got Dave Lombardo, who's played with everyone from Slayer to the Misfits to Suicidal Tendencies to Mr. Bungle to Dead Cross. You've got Doro, you've got Al Jorgensen, you even have some current and former members of Ellefson's own Megadeth appearing on the record, like Jimmy DeGrasso and Dirk Verburen. Like, this is definitely one of the biggest boomer rock cover albums I've heard in a while. No arguing that, but it is ultimately still a boomer rock cover album. There's absolutely no transformation done to any of these songs whatsoever, and none of these versions even stand up to their original versions. None of them. They're by no means terrible or anything like that, but let's be honest, are you going to listen to Ellefson's version of Sheer Heart Attack over the original by fucking Queen? I sure as hell wouldn't. I don't know, if you're over the age of 50 and you're super bored and you've got an hour and 17 minutes to kill, check it out, but otherwise I wouldn't go out of your way for this. Next up, we have Blood Hails Steel, Steel Hails Fire from Megaton Sword. This is a very cool record here. Very epic, heavy power metal with old school production value, consistently super heavy, super catchy, super engaging. 2020 has been a pretty good year for traditional heavy metal with some big standout records from Haunt, Spirit Adrift, Eternal Champion, and this is just as worthy of that same recognition. If you're looking for more old school metal fury, you need to check this out. Next up, we have Detritus of the Final Age from Harlott. As the year has been coming to an end, people have obviously been talking about the best metal of the year, and in turn some of the best thrash metal of the year. People have been talking about Havoc, Warbringer, Mr. Bungle, the new Sodom record especially. Some people have also thrown this record from Harlott into the mix, and while I don't think this is objectively all that bad, I would definitely disagree with calling this the best thrash of the year. It is very one-dimensional, very generic. There's absolutely nothing on this record that I haven't heard done 10 times better by any of the bands we just mentioned, by any other thrash band that's in the public eye right now, to be honest with you. Which isn't to say it can't be fun, don't get me wrong. You get a couple buddies together, you order a couple pizzas, you drink a couple beers, you listen to this album, you're gonna have a fun night. Guaranteed. But it's just not really the kind of thing I get a whole lot out of, aside from being a half-decent party record. Especially since at my parties, we don't eat pizza and listen to thrash. We have a bunch of edibles and listen to Gorguts and Portal. Yeah, my parties are fucking weird sometimes, man. I'm just not really feeling this ultimately. I'm probably going to end up being in the minority, especially amongst the true diehard thrash metal nerds, but so be it. Next up, we have Retrospect from Aviations. This is an EP that was sent to me directly by the band's drummer. Hi, James. How are ya? Sorry we didn't get the chance to talk about this on the channel. It's been kind of a busy week here, but at least we get to talk about it here, eh? I like this a lot. And I'm not just saying that because, again, the drummer sent it to me and might very well be watching. I legitimately like this record. It's very clean, very melodic. I'm reminded a little bit of Dream Theater. I'm reminded a little bit of Protest the Hero in some parts. The bass and guitar work is absolutely wild at times, as is the percussion, and I especially like some of the acoustic and instrumental pieces that are on the latter half of this release. Yeah, I like this thing. Had I gone ahead and reviewed it, this probably would have gotten a 3.5 out of 5 as well. If you're looking for some really well-produced modern prog metal, I think you need to check this out. Next up, we have Unveiling the Threshold, an especially raw, earthy, and scratchy piece of death metal. Vocals, incomprehensible, guitars and bass bleeding together into static and fuzz. The only thing that really comes through even semi-clearly is the percussion itself. It is a very primitive record, to say the least. It reminds me a lot of some of the earliest demos from Outer Heaven and Tomb Mold. Yeah, it's not going to win awards for being an especially clean record, but to be fair, there is definitely a lot of fun to be had within the utter sonic chaos. Particularly for those of you who like your death metal to be as unpolished as possible. I would personally like to see a little bit more refinement. I think the band gets by mostly on sounding as ghastly as they do, but hey, I did still have a somewhat fun time with this, and I won't knock anyone for having a legitimately more fun time with this. And finally, this brings us to the self-titled debut album from Cult, Burial, a super tight and intense slice of modern blackened death metal. It is fierce, it is ferocious, it is incredibly razor sharp. It doesn't waste any time on filler or symphonic intros and outros, going straight for the jugular. It's not an especially inspired record, especially not lyrically. I mean, for God's sakes, one of the songs is literally just called Kill. I think you can guess what that's about. Even 6 Feet Under is a little bit more creative as far as the wordplay is concerned. But hey, the music is ultimately where it counts. And I think that a good majority of people are definitely going to connect with this very brutish and in-your-face kind of blackened death metal. I would definitely say check this out if everything I've talked about has piqued your interest. And wow, that's it. I'm not sure how long this video is going to end up, but I can tell you this is the fastest I've ever recorded one of these albums I missed videos. Which works out well for me, I suppose, because I gotta put the finishing touches on that Best Metal Albums of 2020 video. Which again, tomorrow, December 4th, be there or be square. If you aren't already subscribed, press this button right here for updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.